In this video, we're just going to walk through a few examples where we need to apply many, most, or even all of our exponent properties that we've learned in order to simplify an expression. So let's start with the first one. We're going to simplify this quantity. Now I have a couple of choices here as far as how I proceed. Since I have this whole quantity raised to the second power, I could go ahead and just raise all of that to the second power and then simplify the fraction. Or I could opt to simplify the fraction first and then raise the result to the power. For this particular problem, I think that's going to be my approach because I think it's going to take a little bit less work on our part if we simplify first and then raise it to a power. But I do have choices. And as long as I'm applying the exponent properties all correctly along the way, I should end up with the same result in the end. All right, so I'll simplify inside of the parentheses first. I have first my numbers, 4 in the numerator, 2 in the denominator. I can take the greatest common factor out of both of those and cancel it. And when I do that, I'm left with a 2 in the numerator. Then I focus on my x's. I've got x to the 5th in the numerator, x to the 8th in the denominator. One way or the other, I should end up with an x to the 3rd in the denominator from that expression. I can either subtract those and get x to the negative 3 and then move it and change the exponent to a positive, or I can use the idea that the bigger power is in the denominator and just subtract bigger minus smaller and leave the result where the bigger exponent was to begin with. And then y to the 7th over y to the 3rd simplifies to y to the 4th in the numerator. And now I can take that whole expression that's inside of the parentheses and raise it to the second power. So I'm going to take 2 to the second power and y to the 4th to the second power. And then in the denominator, x to the 3rd to the second power. And that all simplifies to be x to the 6th. All right, part B. Again, I have choices. I can either simplify each fraction individually, then multiply them together, and then have to simplify again, probably. Or I can go ahead and multiply them together first, and then simplify the result. I think for me, in this case, the easier approach is going to be to multiply them together first, and then simplify, because then I don't have to do multiple simplifications of the fractions. So I'm going to multiply these two together. I multiply out their numerators, 4 times 6, x to the 3rd times x to the 5th, y to the negative 7 times y to the 9th, y to the 2nd, and then in the denominators, 3 times 5, x to the 8th times x to the 3rd, and y to the 2nd times y to the 4th. And now I can go ahead and simplify all these. I start with my numbers. 24 over 15, I find the biggest factor that I can take out of both of those, and that's going to be 3. If I take a 3 out of both of those, it leaves me with an 8 in the numerator and a 5 in the denominator. By the way, if you have trouble reducing those fractions like that, we can do that really easy on our calculator. Just go ahead and take the numbers that are there, 24 divided by 15. I'll turn that into a decimal, but then I can go to my math menu and change it over to a fraction. And I get 8 over 5, which tells me I want 8 in the numerator and 5 in the denominator. Then I deal with my x's. X to the 8th over x to the 11th means I'm going to have an x to the 3rd in my denominator. And y to the 2nd over y to the 6th means I'm going to have a y to the 4th in my denominator. And so there's my final answer for that one. All right. Now my choices in A and B are somewhat limited. Since I have these expressions raised to powers, I'm going to have to go ahead and raise those expressions to the powers to begin with. So I'll do that. I'm going to raise each factor of what's inside the parentheses here to the 3rd power. So 2 to the 3rd. X to the 5th to the 3rd means I'm going to multiply those exponents. And y to the 6th to the 3rd, I'm going to multiply those exponents. Then I do the same thing with the second set of parentheses. I raise both things inside parentheses to the second power. X to the third to the second gives me x to the sixth. Y to the fifth to the second gives me y to the 10th. And now I can go ahead and use my multiplication property to combine my x's and y's. X to the 15th times x to the 6th, I add the exponents. Y to the 18th times y to the 10th, I add those exponents. And there's my simplified final answer. Alright, let's do the same thing. We'll get rid of the parentheses by raising both things inside those parentheses to the negative 2 power. Gives me x to the negative 10, y to the negative 12. Keep everything else the same. And then I'm going to go ahead and handle these one type at a time. Start with my numbers. Got a 2 and a 3. Multiply those together. Gives me 6. Then my x's. X to the negative 10, x to the 8, x to the negative 5. To multiply all those together, we're just going to go ahead and add the exponents. Gives us, let's see, negative 10 plus 8 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus negative 5 is negative 7, so that gives us x to the negative 7. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my y's. Y to the negative 12 times y to the 4th times y to the 6th. Y to the negative 12 times y to the 4th is y to the negative 8 by adding those. And y to the negative 8 times y to the 6th is y to the negative 2. And then my last step here is going to be to get rid of the negative exponents by shifting those variables into the denominator and changing the exponents over from negative to positive. All right. Good luck with your practice problems.